Yes.
I'll start my presentation on stem cell cultivation, which basically involves the explant culture system and the air suspension method. But before we go down to that, I'll give a brief introduction as to what are stem cells. Now, stem cells are cells that are undifferentiated as compared to the rest of the tissue. And the properties which define the stemness is that there are a small population within that tissue, they're slow cycling, they have an unlimited capacity to renew, and they undergo asymmetric division, which means that one of the daughter cells becomes a stem cell and the others continue as transient amplifying cells as we see in the limbus. The last but not the least, they're highly chronogenic within the culture. So these are some of the properties, and this is the background which I'm basing my talk on. And as we know, the limbal stem cell disease is characterized by a triad, which is the corneal tissue undergoing conjunctival changes, which is known as conjunctivalization, vascularization, and chronic inflammation, which presents as pain, watering, and photophobia. Now, there are various ways to combat this. However, stem cells cultivation have found a niche as far as the treatment of this particular condition goes. So a brief background, it was Thoft in 81 who carried out conjunctival transplantation for reconstruction of corneal surface in mononuclear chemical burns. And he thought that there would be transdifferentiation, wherein a tissue which is conjunctival would then have a phenotype which would turn into corneal. So basically, from columnar stratified non-keratinized squamous, it would turn into squamous non-keratinized, which is the corneal tissue. So Thoft in 1984 carried out a keratoepithelioplasty, but the most successful break came when Reinwald and Green carried out stem cells for a burns patient. So basically they were epidermal skill cells, and therefore the idea was incorporated by Pellegrini in 1997 and later by Koizumi and Dr. Sangwan in India in 2006, wherein ophthalmology, regenerative medicine, the idea came about. So limbal stem cells, are all the cells in the limbal area stem cells? No, they're not. They are a certain subset of the population of the stem cells which reside in the basal area, which are stem cells. And how do we define them? What are their markers? My previous speaker has already delved into the markers, so I'll not go directly into the markers. However, we must understand that the limbal basal epithelial cells express keratin. Now, keratins are basically intermediate filaments. They are proteins which could be type 1, which is acidic, or basic type 2, or intermediate filaments. So these cytokeratins are found in certain areas. For example, the limbal basal epithelium would have K5 and K14, whereas the more transdifferentiated squamous cells, which have the cornea, would be K3 and K12, and K12 will be more specific. Going further, the limbus. So how do the corneal, conjunctival, and limbal epithelia differ? This has already been discussed. However, the limbus acts as a barrier between the cornea and the conjunctiva. The corneal cells, which are squamous non-keratinizing cells, and the conjunctival cells, which are the bulbar conjunctiva, that is stratified columnar non-keratinizing cells and have goblet cells. So basically the limbus acts as a barrier and prevents these cells from migrating across from the conjunctiva onto the cornea. If they do, as in limbal stem cell deficiency, then we get conjunctivalization of the cornea. So limbus is an intervening tissue and it is a barrier. On the corneal side, it is a termination in the basement Descemet's membrane, and on the conjunctival side, it is around 1 millimeter from the cornea. Now, though the cells, the superficial cells of the limbus are quite similar to that of the superficial cells of the rest of the cornea, what differs is the basal cells. They are unique in that they are smaller and that they are less columnar and have more mitochondria. They also have undulations which go into the stroma, which are apparently thought of to be known as the palisades of Vogt, where the stem cells reside. Also, the limbal supporting matrix has vessels and lymphatics, which is of course not there in the clear cornea, and also has unmyelinated nerve fibers. So this particular difference may act as a niche for the stem cells to reside. So palisades of Vogt have been in vogue for a long time. They were described, first noted in 1886, described in detail in 1921. However, we are still not yet clear as to where the stem cells are exactly. So they're distinctive. Yes, in every individual, they may be seen differently, and they are unique to each individual. But, however, they're more discrete, younger, and more darkly pigmented individuals, and they're more pronounced at the inferior and superior limbus, more inferior than superior, and less so on the horizontal areas. They have melanin, they have minute loop vessels, and they form a niche for the stem cells. So if we see over here, these are the in vivo confocal microscopy showing palisades, which are here. These are the focal stromal projections in the seen in the black arrows, and these are the basement membrane cells with clear bright borders and a dark cytoplasm. So, continuing ahead, lymphoglyphics, because they are probably peculiar to each person. This would be in probably more melanin, person who has greater amount of melanin as compared to a European who would have less melanin. So these are peculiar, and as I said, the limbus stem cells reside in a limbal niche. This is Schofield's hypothesis, which was given by him, and this is very important. We must understand that it is the microenvironment which decides what happens to the cell. So the stemness of the stem cells is decided by its microenvironment, just not by the cell itself. So what is this? It involves the extracellular matrix, the cell membrane associated molecules, and the cytokine dialogue that happen, which maintain these cells in that particular state. So it is the niche that drives the colony cell state, and it has the ability to impose stem cells on more differentiated cells. So going by this, there are certain subsets which are holocones, meroclones, and paraclones. Now, holocones are cells which have the greatest capacity to replicate, but only a very limited population of them would divide, and they retain their stemness. However, paraclones on the other end, the other extreme, these cells have shorter replicative cycles, and they differentiate or transdifferentiate much more quickly, like would be with the transient amplifying cells. Meroclones are intermediate in between the two. So if we take, for example, lenticule from a cadaver, this tissue have more paraclones than holocones, and this is important. We're all aware of the XYZ hypothesis, which was proposed by Toft in 1983, wherein the amount of squells that are being desquamated should equal to the amount of cells that are being regenerated by the stem cells, as in the movement which is centripetal as well as apical. So the limbal stem cells translate into transient amplifying cells, which are in the suprabasal layer, which turn into post-mitotic cells, which are there as wing cells or terminally differentiated cells, which are seen superficially. So main topic is, why do we culture stem cells? We can just take a graft from the other eye or from another donor. The reason this is because lesser tissue is required, number one. It is autologous, so lesser amount of post-surgical immunosuppression required, saves costs and the side effects. Less chances of iatrogenic limbal stem cell deficiency in those people who have either previously undiagnosed partial limbal stem cell deficiency, or you require a larger graft. Thirdly, the advantage of this is that you can regraft in case of a failure, and the cell cultured may be stored in a cell bank. So human amniotic membrane, or HAM, has been used as a biological membrane to transfer these, to grow these cells as a substrate. And the reason for that is we are very aware of already its biological properties, and that it is immune privileged. Okay, it has anti-inflammatory properties, anti-fibrotic, anti-scarring activity, and antimicrobial effects. However, its mechanical properties are determined by the way it's stored in. Stored as a fresh. Hello.
Conclude kar do.
Can I continue?
Sir, sorry to
conclude,
say,
please.
but actually the time is up. But you can sum up within the next 30 seconds, please. It's
Okay, I'll just sum it up with the culture techniques. What substrate do we use as a carrier? Do we use intact versus epithelially denuded AMG, explant versus suspension of cells, and airlifting prior to transplantation? So, as far as substrate use, it's the amniotic membrane that is used, because intact versus epithelially denuded AMG, epithelial denuded AMG gives us better, more uniform edge. Suspension cultures produce better morphology of cells, and airlifting gives us better transdifferentiation. So as far as the explant system is concerned, which is generally used to have an informed consent, you take a ethical committee clearance, and an infectious disease protocol is followed, wherein you take a limbal biopsy. The amniotic membrane from prospective donors is then, which was cryopreserved at minus 80 degrees, is thawed. You see for a change in color, generally it should be pink and not yellowish. And after it has been thawed, it is washed with buffered sterile solution and placed on a glass slide where the epithelium is removed with 0.1 trypsin EDTA. Then it is placed on another glass slide with the basement membrane up, and you tuck the edges inside. And this slide is then placed in a petri dish. Now, the limbal tissue that we had taken and which was transported from the HC media is shredded into 4 to 6 fragments and placed on the de-epithelialized amniotic membrane and left there for 20 minutes with a drop of HCE so that it stabilizes. Subsequent to that, human corneal epithelium supplemented with autologous serum or calf serum 10% is used to submerge the tissue, and it is incubated overnight in 5% CO2 and 95% air, with the medium being changed every 2 days. Every day, the cell growth is monitored by phase contrast microscopy, and when we get a confirmation of a monolayer, then we know that we have been successful, and the same can then transplanted onto the patient, wherein the maximum density of corneal cells are placed, maximum density cells are placed in the center of the cornea, and the graft of the scaffold is secured with 10-0 nylon sutures if it's next to the limbus, and to the conjunctival side with 8-0 sutures. Now, with the cell suspension, everything is the same. Only thing is we have a feeder layer, which is T3 fibroblasts, which are inactivated by radiation, and the limbal ring tissue is cut, and it is placed as 1.2 units of disc space. What basically this does is it separates the cells, and these separated cells are then placed on denuded amniotic membrane and co-cultured with feeder layer. So the ring tissue, which is from where the stem cells were taken, is then checked under a scanning electron microscope to see that all the stem cells have been removed. Then it is suspended in the media and submerged for 2 weeks. Every day, every 2 days, the media is changed, and then it is lifted again, airlifted again for another 2 weeks. Airlifted basically, you decrease the amount of media so that now the cells are exposed to the air, and it helps in better transdifferentiation. The only difference being both methods produce a healthy epithelial layer, and they both showed expression of K3 and K12, especially K12, which is a corneal marker. But morphologically, the apical surfaces had more distinct junctions and produced more desmosomal junctions, and there was lesser space between the basal cells as far as the cell suspension was concerned. However, the advantage of explant is that it's ease and that there is no enzymatic damage to the donor cell. So here we are seeing on the left, we're seeing the explant, and here we're seeing the cell suspension. Both show healthy, well-stratified.
I am really sorry to interrupt, sir. I'm really very sorry.
Last slide, madam. Just give me a minute.
Yeah.
The cell boundaries here, if you see over here in slide B and E, they're closer in cell suspension method, and the apical villi are well developed in both. When we do immunohistochemical staining for the K3 and K12 markers, we see that they are present in both explant as well as cell suspension. However, they are more prominent in the apical area in the cell suspension method. So markers for stem cells are already covered. Thank you.